Are you confused about what's going on in the housing market? Maybe you're waiting for the other shoe to drop, concerned about what's going to happen as we slide into the end of this year. Well, let me break it down. I'm Nick with the Iannitti Group. Just want to come at you with a real quick housing update for August. So I told you a month or so ago, we were talking about consumer surveys on home prices, right? And Fannie Mae had done this survey. They always do. Basically, they do it kind of weekly as well. But if we noticed at the end of last year that 37% of people thought that home prices would be going down over the next 12 months, right? And this number was significant because it was almost twice as much as the next closest month, all the way back to 2010 when they started taking the survey. In fact, it was so bad, right? This is basically it broken down week by week that, basically towards the end of last year in January of this year, people thought that, a repeat of the 2008 crash was so probable. They thought it was more probable. They were thought home prices were coming down worse than what they thought would happen during the pandemic and worse than the actual crash itself, which is kind of crazy, right? And why was this going on? Well, like I always say, the headlines, the media that they were basically taking in, right? Headlines always do more to terrify than they do to clarify, kind of clickbait. This was just an example here. Fortune magazine, December 7, 2022, right? A 20% home price decline. 7 forecast models leaning towards a crash. The sky is falling, right? Well, that never really happened. But the reason I'm bringing it up right now is because I've told you over the past couple of months, home prices have rebounded. However, look at this. Fannie Mae, right? They still conduct this survey. And even in June, a quarter of the people out there think that we are basically going to have price decreases over the next 12 months. Okay. That's really concerning because it's just really not the case when we consider inventory and a couple of other things that are going on with mortgage rates that we'll talk about, right? This is Bill McBride, Calculated Risk. He even said it himself. Look, inventory was picking up in 2022. In October, he basically said, "Oh yeah, we're probably looking at a 10% decrease." And then he realized, however, the inventory surge in 2022 was somewhat of a head fake, right? Some potential sellers quickly listed their homes, probably remembering what happened to home prices in 2006, 2011, right? The last crash. But that surge ended pretty abruptly, right? And the reason why people started to get freaked out is if you look at this graph, right? If you look at the if you look at the gray and blue lines, right? And by the way, this is 2017, 18, 19, but this is basically the last 40 years. This graph holds up. This is basically seasonality graphed out, right? We always see that, March, April, the springtime, listings start to grow. May is pretty much the height of that. And then once we get past May, listings start to decline for the rest of the year, right? Well, last year in 2022, when we got to June, listings were still going up, right? That was very concerning to people. They thought that inventory was going to continually go up. We were going to have all this inventory and the market was kind of, the bottom was going to drop out, prices were going to come down and all that other stuff, right? But what actually happened was this, right? Basically, rates jumped up. They doubled for the first time in a single year. That's never happened before, right? And people were left sitting there with a 2.8 to 3% mortgage, and they're like, well, I'm not going to go out and get something else for a 6 or 7% mortgage. So I'm just going to just cool my jets and we're just going to stay where we're at. And that's basically what we saw. We saw a lot of people not engaging in the market, right? And basically that reduction in that supply countered that reduction in demand due to interest rates. So keep that in mind, right? So what actually happened with 2022 pricing? Well, if you look at these black lines, that's the 48-year average of appreciation, right? Month by month. So in the first part of 2022, we were killing it. We were crushing these numbers. Then the interest rate doubled, basically due to the highest inflation rate in the history of the country, due to just absolute reckless, irresponsible spending by our federal government. And they blamed it all on, well, we all know the answer to that. However, that's what caused this correction here for the second half of the year. But what we actually saw, instead of a continuing slide, was basically, right, we saw a bounce. So again, this is that 48, these black bars, same 48-year average, right, of appreciation. And we see as we started off the year, we were a little bit below, but now we've started to get back to what we've kind of witnessed over the past few years, where appreciation is basically outstripping the average. It looks something like this. This is Case-Shiller, FHFA, CoreLogic. Same thing when we look at Zillow, Black Knight, Freddie Mac, all of them showed this dip right here. This is basically the spikes in the interest rate, right, coming down. And then as we got to this year, we saw home prices start to rebound, right? Because we saw some stability come back to rates. People started to get their head around the fact that these new rates are probably going to be somewhere in the 6%. Okay. So this was really interesting. This is the top 20 cities that had the largest amount of appreciation over the last 3 years, right? So notice the homes that were above 50%. Atlanta's pretty close, right? But you've got Charlotte, Dallas, Miami, Phoenix, San Diego, Tampa. Okay, keep in mind, the reason I point these out, right? Like San Diego, Tampa area, and Phoenix, if you're up 54% or 52% over the last 3 years and you had some type of market condition that caused a 10% slide in home prices, is that really a big deal, quite honestly? I mean, especially if you're going to be in your home for the next 2 to 5 years? No, probably not. If the price of your home doubled in the past 3 years and you have to give it a little bit back, for some market conditions, it was never going to indicate the end of the world or any type of crash. And this is the kind of perspective that you need to keep in it. Okay. This is Andy Walden said, there's no doubt that the housing market is reignited from a home price perspective. Firming prices have now fully erased the pullback we tracked through the last half of 2022. Okay. So things have come back. We see now that a lot of these places, by the way, if you got that wrong in the beginning of the year, you thought prices were going to be coming down, you weren't alone, right? All of these experts basically got it wrong as well. So now they've all basically reforecasted. This is what the current forecast looks like, and it's probably going to be a very positive year for home ownership. Okay. But I wanted to put this back up here real quick. Okay. Again, this is the 48-year average monthly price movement. So what this basically is talking about is how much homes actually appreciate by the month. In other words, again, this is back to seasonality, okay, and basically mapped out. So what we know is that homes tend to appreciate faster in May than they do in November, okay? This is why whenever I give you the monthly market update, like I'm going to do this year or this month for San Diego and for Sarasota as well, it's why we always compare things month over month or year over year, right? We really don't want to like compare May to January. It's not necessarily a good comparison due to seasonality. That's why we always compare May to the previous May, of the previous year. Okay. Just realize though that what this essentially shows is as we come into September and October and November, December, right? This is appreciation slowing down, right? It's basically just not necessarily home prices coming down. This is the rate of growth that starts to slow as we go into the winter. Okay. So keep in mind that a deceleration of appreciation is not the same thing as home prices depreciating. Okay. The reason I bring it up though is you can bet as we start to see this deceleration of appreciation coming into the winter, the people in the media are going to tell you that home prices are coming down, and this is what they actually thought. So I want you to have the clarity there. Okay. As far as the inventory is still not anywhere where it needs to be, right? Yeah, it is definitely increasing week over week and even month over month. But when you look at it year over year, this is on a national scale. We're still not where we need to be. San Diego right now has about a 30% increase in inventory year over year. Sarasota has about a 60% increase year over year. However, both of them are still hovering around 3 months worth of inventory. Remember, we need 6 months of inventory for a healthy market, right? Even Lawrence Yun says it right here. There are simply not enough homes for sale. The market can easily absorb a doubling of inventory. Okay, keep that in mind. That is what is keeping prices where they're actually at. We simply do not have enough supply. Okay, mortgage rates. When we talk about rates, this is what we're looking at, as far as the major players and what their prediction is going to be, and then we average them out at the end, right? What I think is significant is when we look at into middle of next year where rates might be. If this actually winds up being the case, if we get rates that are going to be somewhere around that mid fives, it's going to be on like Donkey Kong. Okay, like I've been saying, what's really been stagnating the market is a lot of people are sitting on a rate that's 3%. They know that was a historically low rate, once in a lifetime kind of a thing. They know if they go to make a move and change up their housing, they're probably going to be paying a higher rate. They didn't want to pay double the rate, right? There's a new Zillow survey out that basically says those people, if these rates are somewhere in the mid fives, they'll consider making a move. If that happens, I think we're going to see a lot of volume start to come back in the market. Okay. When we're looking at CPI right now, we're probably at about 3%. This is why the Fed has not let up on the rates, right? And if you're thinking, well, if we were at 9% here, like mid last year, and now we're at 3%, why aren't they easing things up? I think it has something to do with this a little bit. When we look back at our history, back in 1972, inflation shot up to 12%. The Fed kind of got things back down to about 5%. They took their foot off the gas and things rebounded back to 14%. So I definitely think they want to try and get things down to around 2% inflation before they really start to consider easing up on the rates. Okay. The other thing is, if we look at CPI, basically the 30-year fixed rate mortgage in relation to inflation, right? They're not directly correlated with one another. They do actually follow one another. So I know right now that inflation has come down. We probably know that the 30-year fixed rate is going to follow. I can't tell you when. No one can tell you when. And if anybody says that they can, they're full of it. But just realize when we look at the trends, right, it's probably safe to say that at some point in time, the 30-year fixed rate mortgage is going to come down with this inflation rate. So if you have any questions about what these numbers mean, is this a good time for you to buy or sell? Just reach out. I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you have. Keep an eye out for my San Diego and Sarasota housing market updates. We'll do a little bit more of a deep dive into those two local markets. And that's it. Thanks so much for tuning in. I appreciate it. And remember, who you choose to negotiate for you absolutely matters.